the remote Gru town, as the cold month of the freezing earth began, knights in silver armor arrived bearing the emblem of the powerful Morn family. A python wrapped around a full moon with a tiger on top. Pa Arthel, an old scholar, and his neighbor, the blacksmith Dim, both shivered at the sight. The Morn family was the backbone of the Gold's Pink Empire, known for producing great military leaders and controlling all military affairs. With war looming against the Halon Imperials nearby, the Morn family's visit likely meant conscription. The Empire's law required every family in the conscription area to provide a young man or pay a large fee. Dim, the only able-bodied man in his family, couldn't afford the fee, and his absence would leave his wife and daughter helpless. But instead of going to the mayor, the knights rode straight to the Pat Manor, a place still blooming with grass and flowers despite the cold. Inside the manor, head-maid Mana greeted Master Leon, a vigorous young knight with brown hair. Leon, the eldest son of the Pat family, was annoyed to hear his younger brother Angor had gone to study with Mr. John. Leon thought John was a crazy old man wasting Angor's time with nonsense and decided to find Angor himself. Leon soon reached John's unusual wooden house on stilts near the woods. The building didn't match any architecture Leon had seen in the Empire, but he admired its sturdy craftsmanship. Inside, he found Angor calmly writing on parchment. Angor greeted Leon as if he expected him. When Leon teased him about learning to be proactive from John, Angor said it was something their late father had taught him. After a brief, playful exchange, Leon asked where John was. Angor was worried about his teacher John, whose health was worsening every day. His legs had completely given out 2 days ago, and he was now resting upstairs after taking his medicine. 20 years earlier, Noah Pat, the brother's father, had found John near death outside their manor and saved him. John never explained what had caused his injuries or where he came from, only saying he was from another place called Planet. He was a gifted storyteller, sharing amazing tales of towering buildings, flying machines, and gardens on the moon. Leon, who loved these stories as a child, grew up seeing them as lies, which made him resent John. Angor, however, trusted John completely and considered him his teacher. He was gentle and calm but stubborn once he made up his mind. One day, Leon found Angor's desk covered in strange characters and asked if Angor was writing about his teenage problems. Angor explained the characters were Hanzi from John's homeland, and the symbols were Arabic numerals, simpler numbers used to record physical constants John had calculated. Leon didn't understand and thought John was brainwashing Angor. He lost any sympathy for John. Leon stopped Angor and gave him an invitation from the city lord. Leon had to go notarize his inheritance with the Lord and Marquis Merlin and said they would leave in half a month. He promised to take Angor to see Master McGeeve's solo concert in Waterford afterward, knowing Angor wanted to see the famous musician. Angor was excited. Leon ruffled Angor's blonde hair, and Angor protested, saying hair was a man's pride. Leon laughed, reminding him he was only 14. After a brief playful fight, Angor went back to his homework from John, and Leon left. Later, Angor found his usual lunch of vegetable stew, bread, and fruit. He missed John's cooking simple fried rice that always satisfied him. Since John grew weaker, Angor had tried to learn to cook from him but failed. John's limbs were now useless. Mana, the head maid, brought John his meal. After eating, Angor asked if John was awake. Mana said John was awake and had eaten all his soup. Angor happily ran upstairs. Mana smiled, thinking about how the brothers, despite their serious appearances, were still children inside, showing their true feelings only to trusted servants. Angor found John on the balcony, frail and pale, with his mute servants standing respectfully behind him. John's foreign features stood out against his shrunken skin. His eyes were cloudy but his pupils still sharp. Without their father, Angor saw John as his most respected elder and lifelong mentor. John stared at the distant woods, looking frail. He sighed, knowing he had ignored the doctor's advice again, and Angor carefully applied salve to John's withered limbs. John seemed resigned, saying his end was near and some unknown force wouldn't let him live. Angor asked if it was an enemy, but John shook his head, saying his real enemy was in another dimension. Angor sent the mute servant away, expecting John to reveal more. Though he had doubted John's story of coming from another world by accident, John's advanced knowledge about microcosm and macrocosm, far beyond anything taught in the Gold's Pink Empire, had convinced him. John then asked if Angor believed the world could have its own consciousness. Angor, recalling John's idea of Gaia's consciousness, cautiously agreed. John explained that after arriving here, his body started failing without any illness. He believed this world had a huge, indifferent consciousness that rejected all foreign souls. His body was failing because it wasn't used to this land. He didn't belong here. Meanwhile, in a decorated hall, Angor's brother Leon Pat, the next successor of Pat Manor, faced Count Eaton Morn of the powerful Morn family. Their knights stood tensely on both sides, with the Morn knights clearly more experienced. One Pat knight even dropped his sword from the pressure. Leon apologized for his knight's behavior and guessed Eaton's visit was about supplies for the front line against the Halon Imperials, a responsibility Gru Town handled. Eaton said supplies were fine, and that he came to ask Leon if he had ever heard of something called morning dew. Leon couldn't recall the name, but Eaton then presented an exquisite wooden box with unique carvings. Leon instantly recognized it as John's personal tea box, and a sense of unease settled over him. Despite his personal dislike for John, Leon knew Angor deeply respected their teacher, prompting him to protect the old man. He firmly denied any knowledge of the box or the tea. Eaton gave Leon a long, cold stare, a flash of malevolence in his eyes, before abruptly departing. The encounter and the Count's swift exit deeply disturbed Leon. He ordered his family knights to remain alert and rushed back to John's wooden house, his mind racing with worry. Seeing his brother's anxious expression, Angor immediately asked what was troubling him. Leon quickly explained that Count Eaton had shown him a tea box, specifically one with wave-like patterns. Angor, however, produced a different box, carved with a dragon, explaining that John typically kept his own tea in that one. He clarified that John often crafted custom-carved boxes as gifts for others, like the peach-adorned one for their mother or the bat-carved one for their father. The wave-pattern box Leon saw was likely another such gift. John, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke, asking Leon what had happened. Leon recounted Eaton's visit and the box. John chuckled, dismissing it all and insisting he had no enemies in Gru Town. He explained that his illness had confined him to the town for years, preventing him from traveling far enough to make any foes. Leon, however, remained skeptical, pointing out that the box was undeniably John's handiwork. Angor then offered a different theory. Perhaps Count Eaton wasn't after John himself, but simply the morning dew tea. Still, Angor admitted, it seemed strange for a noble to go to such lengths just for tea. Leon recalled the morning dew from Count Eaton's stories. It was just tea green leaves John liked, brewing into a pale green liquid with leaves that looked like tiny dancing trees. Leon barely remembered the taste. Maybe bitter, so he asked John if there was anything special about it. John hesitated, then said the seedlings didn't come from this world. He had brought them from another. Leon rolled his eyes, said he'd invite Count Eaton to the manor the next evening to try the tea, and walked off, uninterested in John's otherworld claim. Angor watched the tea steep, noting the leaves rising and falling in the boiling water. He preferred strong, milky tea but drank the bitter, grassy morning dew around others. He tried it many times, bitter at first then sweet, but nothing seemed unusual. Still, Count Eaton had asked his brother about it, so Angor wondered if the Count doubted the seedling's origin like John suggested. Angor turned to files from his teacher's bookshelf. Histories of the Goldspink Empire, languages, cultures, medicine, astrology. He finished an epic about a sea warrior that John had commented on, saying it was overly praised and not useful for historical facts. John had once focused on physical data but shifted to literary and historical research after realizing this world's constants didn't match Earth's. Their notes formed the only organized knowledge of this world. At the book's end, Angor saw John's note in Hanzi. Most people here were unlettered, lacking a universal understanding of their world. Ancient China had the idea of a round sky and square Earth, a basic but wrong model. John hoped to find or give a name to this world. Angor then picked up another parchment, a guide comparing Chinese and Western medicine, written entirely in Hanzi, likely readable only by him and John. Evening came. A mute servant lit a fire, filling the house with warm light, cricket sounds, and distant crows. Outside, near Gru Town, a temporary camp for Count Eaton's forces glowed. In its center stood a large black tent edged in gold, like a moon surrounded by stars. The cold wind of the freezing earth month rattled the armored knights, so Eaton ordered a patrol and let the rest by the fire. Later, Eaton entered the black tent. Inside, sparse decorations gave the place a strange feeling. An old man in a black robe with a white beard sat writing while a crystal ball floated nearby, its mist shifting. The old man glanced at the ball, felt faint, and looked away. His deep, hoarse voice asked if Eaton had found the morning dew. Eaton told him about his talk with Leon in detail. The old man dried crimson ink on his paper and said Leon's expression had changed when he saw the wooden box, suggesting its maker might be a caster. He examined the paper's patterns, crimson waves with strange symbols, and his eyes ached. The old man said the magic formula on the scroll was called Surging Waves and would help in the battle against Halon. He added it was a pity Eaton wasn't talented. Otherwise, he could have taken him from the old Earth. Eaton's face darkened and said he'd let his father take brother Alan and sister Aline but would stay with the family. The old man sighed, thinking of his grandchildren. He said wizardry talent was extremely rare, a blessing to have two in a row. Alan and Aline were his grandson and granddaughter, so he would protect them. He lamented his own modest talent and said he'd soon have to rely on them. Turning back to the wooden box, the old man inspected its carvings, found no magical trace, and said it was probably made by an ordinary craftsman. He muttered that finding a caster on the old Earth was impossible. Elemental magic was blocked here, and occultist or bloodline wizards couldn't get the materials they needed. This land was forsaken. Eaton, his eyes glinting with cruelty, vowed to force the truth from Leon, even if it meant burning Pat Manor to the ground that night to secure his father's breakthrough. His father, a white wizard known for avoiding unnecessary slaughter, silently consented, underscoring the critical importance of his own advancement. As Eaton prepared to leave after Alan and Aline departed, Knight Commander Mal arrived, reporting that Viscount Leon had just sent a messenger with an invitation. Eaton read the invitation from Leon Pat to have tea at the manor, doubt in his eyes. His white-bearded father was briefly surprised but then laughed, saying the family would survive another night. Eaton, knowing his father didn't plan to attack the manor, smiled and asked why the sudden change. The old man pointed to a wooden box, implying the invitation's reason was there. Night passed, and the manor was bathed in morning sun, unaware how close they had come to disaster. Early that day, Angor led the maids to the tea garden, a greenhouse John had warmed against the harsh winter. He ordered them to pick fresh morning dew leaves, some for brewing tea that evening, the rest for manna to stir-fry. Only leaves heated to stop enzymes kept their fragrance, and Angor planned to gift these preserved leaves to Count Eaton. John sat on the second-floor balcony, enjoying the rare winter sun and humming quietly. Angor came up, took salve from a mute servant, and rubbed it on John's weakening limbs. John barely looked at him, knowing why his body was failing and doubting he'd survive the month of freezing earth. He smiled faintly, welcoming the gentle wind and thinking about memories. John said he would accept traveling back to Earth even for a second before dying, finally understanding why people longed for their origins. Angor looked sad but didn't know how to comfort him. Parting from a teacher far from home was painful. The quiet broke when John pointed to a half-buried transparent object in a flower pot and asked Angor to pass it. Angor dug it out, cleaned it, and gave John the oval glazed sphere. John stared, his face shifting from bitterness to sorrow, then a sad smile. He said he had dropped it in a forest 3 years ago and wondered if fate had brought it back. Angor blushed and said he had found the sphere after John threw it away, thinking it was from John's family because John had valued it so much. He hid it in the pot in case John changed his mind. John was silent, then quietly said maybe fate belonged to Angor. He added the sphere wasn't from his family but could be considered something from Earth and offered to tell its story. As John told the story, Angor grew more shocked. The sphere was more than a keepsake. 20 years ago, John was a scientist on Earth born in China, working on the secret Montauk project in Long Island, New York. The project began from the 1942 Philadelphia experiment, where a naval destroyer vanished and reappeared 7,000 kilometers away, revealing long-distance teleportation. After decades, an alien object called the Alien Eye crashed in the Sahara's eye of the desert. Countries fought for it, and it ended up at the Long Island lab, where scientists found it could teleport objects when hit by certain high-energy waves. John's job in the 6th phase of the Montauk project was to record how plants reacted to the Alien Eye's waves. One day, he brought sealed saplings, including a Chinese tea seedling, into the research zone. While most plants died, the tea seedlings survived. As John attached his parasitic chip to it, a malfunction sent high-energy beams into the Alien Eye. Space collapsed, darkness spread, and the eye gave off a terrifying aura that swallowed John and the seedling. John passed through dimensional barriers and landed in this world, still holding the Alien Eye and badly wounded. He was rescued by the old Viscount Pat. Now, years later, the glazed sphere, once a simple keepsake, connected John's broken past to his uncertain present, pushing both teacher and pupil to face the mysteries of the Montauk project and the fate still pulling at their lives. The Alien Eye, once magical, was now an ordinary glazed sphere. Angor realized the pale blue glazed sphere, the Alien Eye, was why John had come from Earth and why he was now so sick. John, whose body was failing, put the sphere into Angor's hand and said he had thrown it away before but now it was Angor's to keep. John asked that if Angor ever reached Earth, he should bring John's ashes back to China. Angor felt helpless about John's illness, knowing he couldn't fight Gaia's consciousness, but decided to stay by John's side until the end. That evening, Angor went to the castle where his brother Leon was hosting guests from the powerful Morn family, Count Eaton and his children Alan and Aline. Angor greeted them with natural noble manners. Aline, on the edge of adulthood, blushed and hid behind her brother, clearly affected by Angor's good looks. Count Eaton was also surprised by Angor's appearance, noting how different he was from their plain father. As Leon prepared to serve tea, the hall doors opened and a cloaked figure entered through the rain. Count Eaton and his children quickly showed respect, introducing the newcomer as Mara Morn, Eaton's father. Mara had been delayed on the way. Angor noticed the faint red dirt on Mara's soft leather shoes, a rare color found only in the Pat's tea garden, suggesting Mara had been there, likely interested in their special morning dew tea. Angor worried since his family was no match for the powerful Morns. Leon ordered head-made manna to serve pastries and teas. He introduced the first tea, icy honeydew, which most of the Morns barely tasted except Aline, who liked it. The second tea was lemon milk tea, which Leon said was Angor's favorite. Aline eagerly drank it and found it excellent. Aline and Alan both enjoyed the milk tea, preferring it to flour blends. Their father, Count Eaton, chuckled, understanding from Leon's words that the tea was intended for the children. Mara, seemingly fond of his grandchildren, even pushed his own cup to Aline. While Manna served more teas, Mara remained largely indifferent, only sipping 2 green teas that John also liked. Angor, however, focused on the last teapot, which held morning dew, one of John's most cherished teas and the only plant he had brought from Earth. When Mara opened the last teapot, he suddenly became excited. The tea leaves looked ordinary, but he stared at the greenish-yellow liquid with such intensity that he jumped up and knocked over his chair. Angor wondered why Mara reacted so strongly to the morning dew tea. Mara then drank it carefully and solemnly, silencing the whole room. As Mara closed his eyes, a strong aura burst from him, stunning everyone. Suddenly, no one could speak or move. Mara pulled out a crystal ball and explained he had cast a charm of binding and a ward of silence on them to prevent accidents during his spiritual breakthrough, which the lesser magical plant was helping him achieve. He said he would release them afterward. Angor and his brother Leon, who had never seen anything supernatural, panicked. Their whole view of the world was shattered. As Angor calmed down, he noticed Aline smiling at him comfortingly. He returned the smile, making her blush. He closed his eyes and thought about Teacher John's stories of magic and spells, which they had always dismissed as made up. Now he questioned everything. He remembered the history of a fire-breathing dragon and an elder in white robes who banished it with a flick of his wand. A story John said was just a myth to calm people. Could that elder have been like Mara? Angor's understanding of reality began to change. About 30 minutes later, Mara finished his breakthrough, his face full of joy. He had been stuck as an intermediate apprentice for 20 years and thought he'd never reach high apprentice. That frustration made him take a job searching for talented students in Old Earth, a task he thought pointless. But fate surprised him. He found 2 talents, his grandchildren Alan and Aline, and discovered the morning dew tea, a plant almost as powerful as the rare white orchid potion, which helped with breakthroughs. After tracking the tea to Gru Town, he realized even a small bit of luck could push a wizard forward. After lifting the spells, Mara, still glowing from his recent success, explained wizardry as a system combining natural talent and knowledge, used by those called wizards. When Mara said wizard, Angor felt a strong pull toward the truth wizards seek, a feeling he didn't resist but set aside for later, perhaps stirred by his mentor John's teachings. Mara, in high spirits, shared more about this hidden world. He said even he was only an apprentice wizard. True wizards who break their limits to pursue truth are less than 1%. He also explained their world, called Old Earth by locals, was known to wizards as the marginalized island, a place lacking active elements, making it inefficient for elemental wizards who often left for better planes. That's why it was called Dead Land, and considered cast aside by wizards. Mara then offered to repay Viscount Pat's kindness with the morning dew by helping with any trouble he had on Old Earth. Count Eaton interrupted, suggesting Mara could help Leon skip the trip to Waterford to claim his Viscount title, since the powerful Morn family's influence could handle it. But Leon, aware Mara represented a far greater world, didn't accept the offer. Before Leon could respond, Angor nudged him. Leon caught the hint and said the morning dew originally belonged to Angor, so Angor should decide how to use Mara's favor. Eaton, surprised by Leon's generosity toward his brother, said nothing more. All eyes turned to Angor, who stayed calm and said he had 2 troubles, a big one and a small one. If Mara could help with the big one, the small one wouldn't matter. Mara invited him to explain, assuming it was a minor issue for a protected noble. Leon, however, already guessed what Angor would say. Angor revealed his big trouble was his mentor John, who had been part of their family for 20 years and taught him wisdom, but whose health was failing. Angor led Mara to his teacher John's stilt house and asked him to wait while he went inside to inform John. Mara found the house unusual for Old Earth but admired it as a clever mortal design. Meanwhile, Alan and Aline explored nearby with childlike curiosity. Leon offered everyone wine, and the adults settled into conversation. Upstairs, Angor woke John and told him about Mara, the wizard. John, groggy at first, suddenly sat up in disbelief when he heard the word wizard. Angor confirmed Mara was a level 3 apprentice wizard. John then realized why his physics formulas never worked here. This world had supernatural powers. He admitted he'd been foolish to think himself superior to the locals and felt trapped by his own limited view. His emotional outburst, spoken in his native language, showed deep regret and self-mockery. Downstairs, Mara asked what language John had spoken. Leon said it was John's home tongue from a place called China. Mara didn't recognize the name and dismissed it as a distant country not worth his time. As a new high apprentice, Mara just wanted to solve Angor's problem quickly and return to his studies to get stronger. Soon Angor brought John downstairs. John used a self-designed wheelchair with wheels and springs to climb stairs. Despite being just over 50, John looked much older. Mara guessed over 100. Mara, nearly 80 but appearing younger thanks to recuperation, noted John's mechanical skill and thought it a shame he was too old to pursue alchemy. As John approached, Mara felt a strange, unsettling aura from him, like what he'd sensed from otherworldly slaves before. He wondered if John was a visitor from another plane, maybe a humanoid. Mara's smile grew, thinking capturing John could earn him valuable magic crystals. Mara told John he would use the detect disease spell to find a cure. Without waiting, he summoned his crystal ball and began chanting. A pale green aura spread over John, calming him and restoring color to his face before he fell into a deep sleep. Everyone else thought Mara was casting a healing spell, but Mara was actually using Expel Deceit, a level 2 cantrip that, with some adjustment, could reveal a target's true race if the target didn't resist. John, believing he was being healed, didn't resist. A green aura scanned John from head to toe before returning to the crystal ball. Mara then silently read the Expel Deceit spell's result, which confirmed John was 100% human. Despite a lingering doubt from his own instincts, Mara decided to trust the spell's findings. With his misgivings about John's nature resolved, he could now fulfill his promise to Angor, and began constructing the pattern for a detect disease spell. Angor watched Mara cast his spell, sure the powerful wizard would save his teacher, John. Leon, though initially doubtful about using this favor for John, supported Angor, believing John's chronic illness could be cured. But when the green aura faded from John, Mara's relaxed face turned serious. He tried again but found nothing. Having just reached High Apprentice, Mara was stumped. He used every detection method he knew but found no illness, even though John was clearly wasting away. John's body looked far too old for his age. Embarrassed after his earlier promise, Mara apologized to Angor. He said John's body showed no problems, so the issue must be with his spirit or soul. Angor connected this to John's own words about Gaia's consciousness rejecting him, thinking it must be harming John's soul. Angor asked if soul problems could be cured. Mara said yes, but not by an apprentice like him. Only a true, formal wizard could do that. Someone who could even save a soul from eternal darkness. Angor asked when Mara would become a true wizard. Mara smiled bitterly and said it took him nearly 60 years just to reach level 3 apprentice. Becoming a formal wizard wasn't about time but rare talent and dangerous destiny. Something he didn't expect to achieve. Talent was everything for an apprentice. It decided if someone could become a wizard quickly or never at all. Despair hit Angor hard. Formal wizards were almost extinct in their world. Leon put a hand on Angor's shoulder to comfort him, but it didn't ease the weight of the truth. Then Mara remembered Angor had 2 troubles. Since he couldn't help with John, he asked about the other. Angor realized that if a true wizard could cure John, and great talent could make someone a wizard fast, then maybe he could become that wizard. His other trouble was his curiosity about magic and his wish to learn it. Angor asked Mara if he could become his student. Mara laughed and said wizardry wasn't simple. Talent was the first and most important condition, and it was very rare. He tested thousands across the empire and found only 2 with talent. But Angor insisted Mara test him. Mara agreed, saying it was easy and he could even test everyone in the manor as a favor. It cost him nothing since he had reusable testing mediums from his academy to find new talents. John was asleep under Mara's spell, so Angor had a mute servant take him back to his room. Then Angor joined Leon, who had gathered all servants under 50 in the hall for Mara's talent test. Angor wanted to go first, but Leon told him to let the servants try first, knowing talent was rare and it would be less embarrassing if Angor went after many had failed. Mara explained the talent sphere, a red crystal ball made from the eye of an Abel's beast from the abyss plane. It reflected a person's soul and showed their magical talent through a change only the test taker could see. Mara gave examples. He saw the fireplace flames grow, his granddaughter Aline heard noises, and a boy named Alan saw bread appear. If nothing happened after a minute, the person had no talent. Ori, Angor's maid, was first. She was hopeful this could change her life. She placed her hand on the sphere but saw no change and left disappointed. Dozens more took the test with the same result. Then a young man named Fox claimed he felt a sea of winds. Count Eaton and Leon were excited, thinking they'd found talent. Leon even started to offer a reward. But Mara interrupted, saying the sphere would flash if talent appeared, which it hadn't. Furious at the lie, Mara cast a strong wind spell called Whisper of Wind that blew Fox out the 3rd floor window, sending him screaming to the ground. Leon, shocked, ordered Mana to banish Fox from Gru Town. Everyone realized how harsh the wizarding world could be. After 2 hours, all servants, including the head maid and guard knights, had failed. Mara then looked at Angor. Before Angor could step up, Leon said he'd go first, admitting he wanted to be a wizard for the long life and to see the world. Angor encouraged him with a fist bump. Leon placed his hand on the sphere, but after a minute saw no change and admitted he wasn't talented. He told Angor it was his turn. Angor nodded, determined, and slowly put his hand on the talent sphere. The moment Angor touched the talent sphere, a bright red light flashed, surprising everyone. Leon was thrilled that his closest brother had real talent, knowing it would greatly benefit the Pat family. Count Eaton quickly shifted from surprise to thoughtful calculation, seeing the family's rising power. Alan showed mild curiosity, while Aline smiled, happy to learn wizardry with Angor and no longer regretting leaving home. Mara recovered from his surprise quickly. But Angor, the center of attention, entered a strange experience. He found himself floating, excited because this was the change he'd hoped for. He heard music like a chorus singing carols, but when he looked to ask Leon, he realized he was alone. His family, Mara, and the others had vanished. Only the talent sphere and a quietly burning candle remained. The music grew louder, drawing Angor to the door. The Pat Manor hallway looked familiar but was empty and silent. Outside the window, there was no firelight from the lion's heart lamps that usually burned all night. He wondered if this was really his home. The sky was full of stars, including patterns he'd never seen. Normally, during this season in Gru Town, only a few distant stars show. A cold fear crept in. This was not the Pat Manor he knew. As he tried to go back, 2 huge playing cards appeared. The aces of hearts and spades. They looked like the cards John once made but were hundreds of times bigger, walking on stick-like limbs and armed with a crusader sword, lance, shield, and chain hammer. Before Angor could react, they rushed him and trapped him between their broad surfaces. He couldn't escape and was carried along, eventually giving up and following the card soldiers. They brought him to the hall where the music came from. No one played instruments. Instead, teacups with hearts printed on them hopped in front of the instruments, making the melody. The card soldiers vanished, leaving Angor to explore this strange world. His fear faded, replaced by curiosity. The hall was filled with moving objects. Walking toy soldiers, plush owls flying around chandeliers, and rainbow-colored dragonflies patrolling the air. None noticed him. Floating around, Angor spotted a chair near the main table with someone sitting there. Back to him. He heard the sound of a knife on a plate and pages turning. He realized he wasn't in the real Pat Manor but a parallel space. His teacher had mentioned parallel worlds as a theory on Earth, but here in this universe they might be real. In this parallel Pat Manor, the family was gone. But someone else was definitely there. Angor wondered if the person owned Pat Manor in this world. Angor spotted a small snow-white bunny, less than half a meter tall, dressed in a tailcoat, top hat, and a gold-rimmed monocle. This Mr. Bunny floated in front of a table, focused on a violet-covered book and ignoring Angor, like the other strange creatures around. Angor, still confused about whether he'd really transmigrated or was just in a talent test, suddenly felt a strong urge to return to the closet he'd come from. He trusted the feeling, even though he didn't know where it came from. As he turned to leave, the sound of a page turning made him drift back to Mr. Bunny and the book. The cover had strange symbols he couldn't read, and a cartoonish picture of a girl by a castle that reminded him of the fairy tales John used to tell. He couldn't understand the words but followed the story through pictures. A girl entering a strange land, changing size by eating or drinking magical things, and meeting odd creatures. The story felt familiar, but he pushed that feeling aside and got lost in it. He didn't notice Mr. Bunny turning pages in sync with him or the plush owls, poker soldiers, bonny teacups, and rainbow dragonflies gathering around. He felt like the main character, chasing a talking bunny, sure this was a kind, wonderful place. Then a sharp cackling came from a distant castle. Mr. Bunny warned someone named Shava to run because the Queen of Hearts was coming and would turn her into a card. Angor froze, confused. Who was Shava? Who was he? The story in his mind broke apart as he struggled to remember himself. The bunny grabbed his hand and pulled him toward a rabbit hole to escape, but Angor's mind screamed for clarity. Just as the bunny pushed him toward the hole, the thought "get back to the closet" hit him. Suddenly, he remembered everything. The closet, the talent test, the strange world, and the reading bunny. The world twisted. The rabbit hole became a bloody mouth with sharp teeth, and the cute bunny turned into a ragdoll patched up all over. Horrified, Angor stepped back and ran away. He ended up back in the hall where Mr. Bunny had been, but the calm was gone. A group of card soldiers had surrounded him. Angor found himself trapped in a terrifying vision, surrounded by floating toys and hostile card soldiers. Even Mr. Bunny, who had been reading, now floated before him with cold crimson eyes. When a card soldier lunged, Angor grabbed a book and threw it. A bloody mouth appeared on the cover and devoured the attacker. Terrified, Angor ran toward a closet he somehow knew was safe. Just as he reached the door, a red-haired woman with blade-like nails slashed his back but couldn't cross the threshold, as if the closet door separated 2 worlds. Relieved but in pain, Angor noticed the glowing red talent sphere inside the closet, which urged him to touch it. Suddenly, Angor was back in the real world, disoriented and exhausted. Everyone looked surprised or admiring, but he was still shaken by the vision. His brother Leon nudged him, saying Mara had been asking about his change. Angor said he had been floating, and Mara confirmed that floating was a clear sign of talent. Angor, still unsettled, kept the rest to himself and returned to his seat. Despite everything, Angor still wanted to become a wizard. He asked Mara if he could be his student. Mara said he was only an apprentice and couldn't teach him but was recruiting for the White Coral Floating Island Academy. He offered Angor a spot, meaning he'd have to leave soon. This troubled Angor. He worried about John, whose condition was worsening, and he had promised Leon to accompany him to a ceremony the next day. Leon saw Angor's distress and reassured him that the academy was just a school and wouldn't take long. He promised to find the best doctor in Waterford for John and would spend every last coin to keep him alive until Angor could return to save him. Angor knew John's problem wasn't a disease but the world rejecting him. Something only a wizard could fix. Mara, listening, didn't understand Angor's strong bond with John, who was just a tutor. After a pause, Mara said he had a magic scroll called the Ice Coffin of Healing. Couldn't cure John but could keep him alive for 5 more years. Angor's eyes widened. 5 years was a chance. A hope. Before Angor could answer, Leon stepped forward. He said nothing was free in their world and asked what Mara expected in return for the scroll. Mara, approving Leon's sharpness, said he would give the scroll if Angor accepted his condition. As winter deepened, Angor traveled with Mara and Mara's grandchildren, Alan and Aline, by carriage through a freezing landscape where snow fell and even the distant sea had frozen. Inside, Alan complained about the cold, and Aline teased him for being weak compared to their Carter. Angor stayed quiet, lost in thought. He was still thinking about the deal he made with Mara. In exchange for the Ice Coffin of Healing scroll, Angor had to join Mara on a dangerous ruin exploration once he reached level 2 apprentice wizard. It was risky and uncertain, but saving John was his priority. After reluctantly saying goodbye to Leon, Angor set off with Mara into the unknown. At night, they camped in a shallow pit dug into a mountain boulder. Alan shivered, so Aline wrapped him in a thick cloak. Mara watched them and sent a green light into Alan, explaining it was a preserve heat spell lasting 10 hours. He also told Alan to exercise more to build strength, especially if his talent leaned toward the bloodline art, which would help his body. Aline asked if they had to retake the talent test at the White Coral Floating Island Academy. Angor listened closely, still confused by his own test. Alan had seen an extra piece of bread. Aline had heard noises, but Angor had been transported to another world. A much stranger change. Mara explained that the Abel's eye only showed if someone had talent, not what kind. The Academy's test would be more detailed but still not final. A wizard could choose any art to study, though some rare occult branches like prophecy and astrology required absolute talent. Mara then described the 3 major wizarding arts. The element art dealt with nature's constitution and was practiced by elementalists. The bloodline art involved absorbing strong creatures' bloodlines to gain power, used by bloodline wizards. The occult art focused on mysteries and was practiced by occultists. The element art had the most followers. The occult art had the fewest but the widest range of strength, from very weak to extremely powerful. Mara mentioned Mandala the archaeologist and Sunders the Phantom Master as famous level 2 occultists with very different power levels. Bloodline wizards were usually strong but often bad-tempered. When Aline asked about Mara's own art, he said he was mainly a blaze wizard from the element art but focused on drawing spell formulas, making him more of a supportive wizard. As night grew darker and the mountains and woods faded into shadows, everyone grew tired and eventually fell asleep. Angor lay in his tent, deeply moved by the night's conversation. He now understood the vast diversity of wizardry, with countless paths and sub-branches, and multiple ways to become a practitioner. John's insights had sparked a profound curiosity in him, making him eager to uncover the universe's mysteries. He wondered if becoming a wizard would finally let him explore these wonders, and with that hopeful thought, he drifted off to sleep. After half a month of traveling by carriage, Angor and his companions finally reached Vichy Harbor, the northernmost point of the Goldspink Empire. The journey from the old Earth to the Fey continent was tricky. Merchant ships only came once a year and stayed for just 2 days. To avoid missing it, they arrived early, 8 days before the month of resuscitation, and settled into Moonwater City. Mara, always practical, took them straight to the Bounty Guild. Though mainly a knights association, it offered the city's finest accommodations. Mara covered everyone's stay, including Angor's, and advised them to stay close by so they could be found easily when the ship arrived. Then Mara retreated to his room, using every spare moment to meditate and cultivate his power. Alan and Aline, suddenly free from the constraints of their journey, felt like prisoners on temporary leave. Aline, growing more comfortable around Angor, eagerly suggested exploring the city, famous for its foreign goods. Angor, however, felt uneasy. He noticed Aline's growing affection but was consumed by his promise to John and the weight of his teacher's puzzles. He politely declined, saying he needed to practice his mind daily, and returned to his room. Aline, disappointed, made a duck face and left with Alan to explore on their own. Alone on his sea-facing balcony, Angor took in the bustling harbor and the shining sea. Looking down at the tiny figures below, a sudden loneliness hit him. He gazed south, imagining the peaceful hills and the town where he'd lived for 14 years. Whispering his brothers' and teachers' names, homesickness overwhelmed him. Days passed. As the month of resuscitation arrived, the temperature rose, and sea routes began to thaw, bringing more ships to the harbor. Mara hired knights from the Bounty Guild to watch for the Fey Continent merchant ship around the clock. Alan and Aline had a blast exploring, returning each evening with random treasures. Angor, meanwhile, buried himself in John's complex puzzles. They demanded knowledge from many fields, showing John's high expectations. Even a scholar from Earth would find them vast and difficult. After a month, Angor had only made a quarter of the progress he'd hoped for, and felt defeated by their difficulty. Still, he knew he had to keep going. John had hidden something crucial behind these puzzles, and Angor was determined to find it. One weekend, feeling cooped up, Angor decided to get out. He dressed casually, tidied himself, and stepped into the busy Bounty Guild hall, wearing the polite smile he used with others. The air was thick with sweat from knights and adventurers. Angor quickly realized this wasn't sheltered Gru town, and his noble status meant little here. He calmed his expression, ordered a glass of Penang rum and some roasted meat from a corner bar, and settled in to listen. He ate quietly, eavesdropping on conversations as John had taught him through wuxia stories. He heard rumors of strange deaths in the Heilong Imperial's territory, with important figures dying mysteriously and gruesome scenes left behind. Another group discussed the disappearance of the Gold's Pink Knights, speculating it might be linked to an assassination job posted by the Empire's capital lord months ago. Angor absorbed it all, a silent observer in this dangerous new world. In the bustling bar, adventurers boasted loudly about their feats, agreeing their Gold's Pink Empire guild was superior to any hostile nation. Suddenly, a cold voice cut through the noise. A man in expensive water-blue robes scoffed, claiming the Gold's Pink Knights weren't powerful enough to be behind the recent Heilong incident. This drew the ire of a Heilong merchant, who challenged the man's right to disparage the knights. The man in blue, now rougher in tone, recognized the merchant and warned him to keep quiet and mind his own business within the empire, accusing him of looking for trouble. The Heilong merchant responded with a cold glare, and a dozen fully armored guards appeared to protect him. Though outnumbered, Gold's Pink Knights quickly rallied to the man's side. Soon, both sides stood armed and ready, a dozen men each, bringing the bar to a tense, silent standstill. The standoff was defused by the vice master of Moonwater City's Bounty Guild, who convinced both sides to back down. The Heilong merchant cryptically said the recent incident wasn't the work of humans. Angor was curious but, with his imminent departure to the Fey continent, decided to set the mystery aside. He spent his remaining time exploring Moonwater City. It was 3 times larger than Waterford, the biggest city he'd known, and its beauty made Gru Town's simple stone houses seem like another world. As he wandered, watching the diverse people, Angor reflected on John's advice to learn as he went. He finally understood how experiences outside his family's protection brought his teacher's lessons to life. His journey led him to Sonbana Trader Street, known for exotic overseas goods. Aline had recently bought books there about makeup and fashion, which she enjoyed. Angor hoped to find rich historical materials for John. The street was named after the Sonbana Principe, who pioneered ocean trading 2 centuries ago. Despite his noble upbringing, Angor couldn't hide his wide-eyed curiosity as he took in lively shops and street performers. He even stopped at a milk shop, buying a sweet drink for himself before pretending it was for his sister. Eventually, he found a bookstore adorned with the image of Thoth, the ancient god of knowledge. The shopkeeper, initially wary of casual readers, softened when he saw Angor's polite manner and noble appearance. Angor bought several books, finding deep meaning in their stories. Seeing such a generous customer, the shopkeeper offered Angor a look at his special collection. Old, tattered volumes from foreign fleets, many in unknown languages, gathering dust. Angor's eyes lit up at the prospect and he agreed, even though the books smelled strongly of mold from the damp city. The shopkeeper assured him they were well packed. Just as Angor was about to examine the mysterious books, a loud horn blared from the sky above Moonwater City, cutting through the bustling street. Angor looked out the shop window, surprised by a horn he'd never heard before. The shopkeeper, stroking his mustache, said the foreign merchant ship had finally arrived through the thawed whalebone sea. He sent his assistants to the harbor, hoping for better books to sell. While the assistants left, Angor examined the leather-bound books in the back room. Most were cheap copies of noble family tomes, but the shopkeeper had wrapped them well to keep out mold. After reading quietly all evening, Angor picked a box of the best books and asked to have it sent to the glorious Crown Inn, the city's finest lodging. The books cost him 30 gold coins, almost a decade's income for a family of 4, but Angor told himself the knowledge would be worth it. He felt hopeful as the open sea promised a good year. Back at the inn, the sun had just set. As Angor was about to close his door, Mara and his grandchildren appeared. Mara said the Fey Continent's merchant ship had reached Moonwater Pass and would arrive at Vichy Harbor the next morning. He told Angor to pack that night because they'd board the ship at noon and stay for about half a year. The books would help pass the time. Angor stood on the balcony, thinking as night fell and ravens flew overhead. Later, the harbor grew quiet under 3 dim oil lamps. A figure dressed in black slipped past a small ship, his bright green eyes shining in the moonlight. He moved silently and quickly, like a lone wolf, then disappeared into the darkness. When the man in black ran through the city's central street, he suddenly stopped and said, Then a woman's high, pleasant voice spoke nearby. She said she felt a phantom and wondered if the Goman King had made a pact with the people of Brute Cavern. Fear showed in her eyes as she mentioned a cursed headwear that had haunted her for 2 years and wondered if the crown held more than just authority. She looked toward the Bounty Guild and ran off without looking back. That night, Angor dreamed under the moonlight. Jade-green lines began spreading from his shoulder blades like vines. Mara woke him with a knock. His grandchildren were already dressed and asked why he was still in bed. Confused, Angor said he'd just finished packing and closed the door. Mara led the kids downstairs. Seeing how late it was, Angor quickly washed and dressed, still feeling the strange itch on his back. He wondered if the dream and the green lines had anything to do with the woman's warning but found no answers. He joined the others, his mind full of questions. The group arrived at Vichy Harbor, where the huge merchant ship the Redbud was docked. Mara warned Angor, Aline, and Alan not to cause any trouble on board. He explained that the ship's owner was very powerful, rumored to be linked to the floating mech city, a force even formal wizards avoided. Mara told them to drop any noble attitudes and treat everyone, even the lowest sailor, with respect. Angor was impressed by the ship's size and its violet and white steel walls. His attention was drawn to the figurehead, a solemn maiden with a pale crimson gem set in her forehead. He felt something odd about the gem but couldn't explain it. Suddenly, Mara shouted in alarm. Angor looked where Mara was staring and saw a young man with wild red hair and a cold, blank expression walking down the Redbud. He wore a black wind coat with gold patterns, black trousers with white lining, and brown riding boots. Angor quietly guessed this might be one of the ascetic uniform guys John had mentioned. Aline, nearby, asked what he said, but Angor just stepped back, saying he was curious about the man. Mara gave no explanation and quickly led the kids onto the ship, silencing Aline when she tried to ask more. Angor wondered if the red-haired man was Mara's enemy. Given Mara's sudden fear, the man glanced at the deck with a puzzled look but kept walking, clearly focused on finding someone else. The next morning, the Redbud set sail. Angor stood on deck watching the old Earth continent shrink away. He felt a mix of sadness and unease, realizing he was really leaving home. He pushed the feelings aside and returned to his room to work on John's puzzles. 3 days later, while still studying, Angor heard a knock. Aline was there, saying Mara had returned and wanted to see them. Angor realized Mara had been gone since they saw the red-haired man, probably meeting someone important on the ship's top floor. They found Alan in Mara's cabin, happily eating cake, while Mara sat nearby holding a leather scroll. On the scroll was a wanted poster with a portrait. Mara explained he had been talking with the White Coral Floating Island Academy's escorts, one of 3 wizard groups stationed on the Redbud, about the red-haired man. That man was red-haired the Whis and he was on the ship because of the wanted poster. Mara warned them to stay away from the Whis, whose bad temper was notorious across the South. They would learn more about him at the academy, but for now, avoiding him was the safest choice. Mara's expression softened, and he smiled at the 3 kids, explaining he had arranged with the Redbud's escorts to teach them meditation early, given their talents. Mara explained 2 fundamental rules of the wizarding world. First, all wizards, regardless of their alignment, operated on equivalent exchange. Second, knowledge was priceless and only shared freely among family or close confidants. He then told Angor that while he would teach his own family, Alan and Aline, for free, Angor would have to pay for the knowledge, and he currently had nothing Mara wanted. Angor, who had learned from John that generosity always came with a hidden cost, felt a sense of relief that Mara was being direct. Mara assured him that he could still learn meditation once he reached the White Coral Floating Island Academy and found a mentor. To illustrate the power of meditation, Mara closed his eyes and, without casting any spells, made a wanted scroll float and dance around the room. He explained that this was spiritual power, a force cultivated through meditation that not only determined the efficiency of channeling mana, but could also directly affect the physical world. He warned that spiritual power was inherently unstable, and meditation was crucial for stabilizing it. Next, Mara handed Alan a small booklet containing the triangle channeling, the basic meditation method taught at the academy. He instructed Alan to memorize it, pass it to Aline, and then burn the book, issuing a chilling warning. Anyone caught distributing the method privately would be executed, and Alan and Aline would face the death penalty. Aline, hearing the casual mention of such a severe punishment, began to grasp the brutal reality of the wizarding world. Mara then allowed each of them one question before dismissing them, as he needed to focus on a new magic project. Alan asked about the difference between white and black wizards. Mara explained that the distinction was mainly for apprentices, referring to their general approach, gentle or fierce, but formal wizards did not use such labels. He clarified that while individual wizards could shift their demeanor, wizard groups did have distinct philosophies. He cited the White Coral Floating Island Academy as a moderate organization that would not kill apprentices without reason, unlike some groups on the Fey continent who viewed apprentices as mere research material, emphasizing how fortunate they were to be accepted by the academy. Finally, Angor asked about the fundamental principle behind casting spells. Mara praised his question, explaining that while mana provided the energy, knowledge was the most crucial element. He stressed that for wizards, knowledge was everything, the pursuit of truth, which, when combined with mana, could manifest as eternal miracles. He gave an example of a simple spell that required not just mana, but also a deep understanding of the physical structures and processes involved, highlighting that knowledge accumulation, creativity, and insight were the most important qualities for any wizard. Mara didn't show up afterward, so Angor threw himself into John's puzzles. He knew knowledge was key for wizards, and even if he wasn't sure how John's lessons fit into magic, he trusted they'd widen his view and keep him from getting stuck in narrow thinking. He worked non-stop, filling pages with formulas and numbers, trying new angles like molecular structures and magnetic fields. He felt he was getting closer to the final answer. After nearly 2 weeks of intense focus, only 10 puzzles remained. But the strain was catching up. His ears rang and his vision blurred. His body was warning him. Though eager to finish, he stopped, remembering John once got seriously sick from overwork as a youth, which John said stunted his growth. Angor, only 14, didn't want to risk his health and figured it was safer to assume the worst. He opened a porthole to let in the salty sea air. As the warm breeze drifted in, he thought about his family and why he'd followed Mara to the Fey continent. He brought nothing from Pat Manor except memories of his childhood, his parents, his brother, and teacher's guidance. Saving John was important, but he also secretly wanted to raise his family's status. Mara had said even apprentice wizards got better treatment than nobles, and formal wizards could live centuries. Angor didn't expect to protect his family that long. Just 100 years of prosperity across 3 generations would be enough. He brewed some morning dew tea, a bitter, grassy magic plant he'd split with Mara. He didn't like the taste but hoped it might help as he stepped into the wizard world. After finishing the cup with no effect, a strange seabird landed on his windowsill. The bird was about twice the size of his palm, with brown and gray feathers, red talons, an orange beak, and dark green eyes. What stood out was its outfit. A tall white hat, a blue and white striped bib with a shining pattern, and a small blue pouch hanging from its side, like a mail carrier from a fairy tale. The bird chirped, staring at Angor as if trying to talk. Alone and amused, Angor mimicked a duck's beak and spoke to it. The bird replied with a clear tweet. Angor asked if its name was Tweet and who its master was, admiring the bird's cool look. The bird half closed its eyes, then tried to leave but hesitated and chirped again, as if asking for something. Angor noticed the emblem on its bib and satchel. A very fat woman with violet curly hair, bright red lips, a beauty mark, and crossed knife and fork beside her. It looked like a family emblem, but Angor laughed at the idea and quickly lost interest, preferring to focus on useful knowledge. The bird grew restless, pacing the windowsill and chirping. Angor guessed it was hungry. The bird nodded eagerly. He tore off some bread and offered it, wondering who its master was and how it had been trained to respond. Looking outside at the endless ocean, Angor figured its owner must be a powerful wielder living on one of the redbud's upper levels. Angor tried feeding the seabird breadcrumbs, but it just gave him a disdainful look. He switched to fruit and jerky, but the bird still turned away. When he asked if it was thirsty, the bird nodded quickly. Angor gave it a glass of fresh water, but the bird knocked it away and flew back to the sea. Then the bird surprised him by returning to his room, circling around, and stopping in front of his teacup, which still held the leaves of morning dew, a magical plant Angor had used for tea. The bird was clearly attracted to it. Angor refilled the cup with hot water, and the bird eagerly drank until only the leaves remained. It kept drinking after several refills until it picked the leaves clean. Angor nicknamed it Cleaner. The bird then took a small golden card from its pouch and pushed it toward Angor. He took it, and the bird chirped once before flying out the window and disappearing into the sky. Angor thought the bird was repaying his kindness, recalling his teacher's advice to return favors. The card had a raised image of a plump lady with violet hair, the same figure on the bird's bib. Though the craftsmanship was delicate, Angor didn't know its meaning, so he put the card in his pocket and turned to the sea's sound. He opened a book called Idea on Ancients, a collection of myths from Moonwater City. The stories described gods or powerful wizards who all died tragically, never happy. Angor wondered if these gods were just legendary wizards. After finishing the book at dusk, Angor checked the weather and decided to eat. He went to the White Flander restaurant on the Redbud's middle floor, where apprentices and talents from the White Coral Floating Island Academy, Gravity Forest, and Tower of Hurricane gathered. The hall was full of rookies from all backgrounds. No one showed off status, and the chefs chose the meals. Following his teacher's advice to stay neutral, Angor copied others, took a plate with roast fish, bread, vegetables, winter fruits, and a bowl of potato scallop soup, then sat by a window. As he ate, Angor missed the Chinese food his teacher used to make, and his mood darkened. Without his brother's protection, he knew modesty was safest. A young man in a silver-gray lace shirt entered slowly, his steps drawing attention. Angor recognized him as a well-known noble on the ship but kept his distance, interacting only with Alan and Aline during the month. The newcomer's arrival hinted at shifting social currents, but Angor stayed quietly observant, ready for whatever came next. Dove Silver Heron, a royal successor from the Land of Revelation. The Land of Revelation was a large, important continent, far more significant than the old Earth, which wizards saw as a remote, marginal island. On the ship, Angor noticed the other talents, including Dove, the arrogant third prince from the Central Empire. Dove claimed to be an exchange student heading to the Tower of Hurricane, but everyone knew his Silver Heron Royal Wizard Group was just a front made by apprentice wizards who failed to become formal. Still, his family's wealth and connections made people tolerate his arrogance. One evening in the dining hall, Dove's arrival silenced the room. He glared at someone whispering about his missing lackeys, but his confidence vanished when he found his servants gone. Cursing, he had to get his own meal. Angor, always alert thanks to John's training, heard a faint second door click when Dove entered, though no one else was visible. He dismissed it as his imagination, but his instincts rarely failed him. Suddenly, a high-pitched scream broke the silence. Dove clutched his neck, blood flowing between his fingers, wildly swiping at empty air. A knife wound was clear, but no attacker was near. The other talents whispered nervously but didn't help. Angor calmly noted it was a cut vein, not an artery, but Dove would die within 10 minutes without aid. He recalled the second door click and suspected an invisible attacker. Couldn't be a formal wizard since they would have killed Dove outright. More likely an apprentice or another talent. As Dove weakened, he grabbed a wine bottle and threw it at a window. The spilled wine stopped mid-air, then slowly dripped down, revealing a red human-shaped figure. Someone invisible. A talent explained that powerful invisibility spells like Phantom Shift or Dimension Cloak were for formal wizards, but a simple cantrip called Optic Confusion could be broken by touch. Mr. Komoan, a level 2 apprentice wizard from Gravity Forest, had mentioned this. The wine exposed the attacker. A young, handsome man in tattered clothes, clearly from a poor family. He looked at the bleeding Dove with grim satisfaction and a bloodthirsty grin. Dove stared back with disbelief, hatred, and regret. Angor found the scene predictable and was about to leave when Lady Merlin, a level 3 apprentice wizard from the Tower of Hurricane, appeared. Instead of helping the dying Dove, she ignored him and focused on the young attacker. She waved her hand, instantly cleaning the wine off him, and asked his name with clear delight. Easily introduced himself politely, leaving out a family name since he had none. He was an orphan, and the name easily came from a nobleman who gave it to him after he killed the noble's hound in a fight for survival. Lady Merlin put her hand on his forehead and confirmed his spiritual power was 23, well above normal. She praised how fast he channeled mana and said he'd trained 10 times faster than most. Just half a month after learning the principle of optic confusion, he could already cast it, showing a strong grasp of light and shadow. She told him spells needed both knowledge and mana and that he'd now entered the apprentice stage, telling him to move to the top floor before leaving without looking back. Meanwhile, Dove lay dying, his expression stiffening as no one helped. Easily looked at the corpse, grinned, and left unnoticed. Angor left silently, realizing the wizard world had no clear line between justice and evil. The Silver Heron Royal Wizard Group, including Lady Merlin, showed their cruelty by ignoring Dove completely. After this, Angor worked harder to stay hidden, knowing death was always close in the harsh reality of wizards. Angor retreated to his quarters and buried himself in John's puzzles, skipping meals for days. While he worked, word spread about the tragedy that had bound Easley and Dove. A noble had humiliated a young girl to death. Her friend Easley had been driven by hatred, endured a hard life, and finally slain the noble himself. The tale struck Angor as familiar and unfair. The law protected the rich while the poor suffered, and justice only appeared when the parties shared the same class. Though Angor, a noble, had always been educated by the earth and dismissed class distinctions, the story stirred a reluctant sympathy for Easley. His view shifted again when he learned how Dove's followers had been slaughtered. Dove had gone to the dining hall alone after Easley wiped out every one of his supporters. Small families from the Central Empire, new recruits on the ship, and even talented girls forced aboard. Those victims had nothing to do with Easley, yet he killed them all. Angor recoiled at the cruelty, not out of hatred for Easley but from a growing caution toward the ruthless world of wizards. Time passed and the Redbud slipped through the Whalebone Sea into the notorious Devil's Water, a stretch famed for pirates, sea monsters, bizarre weather, and rumors of ghost ships. For ordinary vessels the area was an impassable barrier, but the Redbud was shielded by wizards capable of repelling the darkness. Halfway across, Aline appeared at Angor's window, pale and dejected. She had been isolated for nearly 2 weeks, her usual aura gone. Slumping onto a bench, she confessed her frustration. Her brother had sensed his spiritual power days earlier, yet her month-long meditation yielded nothing. Tears welled as she lamented the boredom of the practice and the flood of emotions that blocked her training. Angor, unsure how to console her, offered a simple promise that she would succeed with time. The reassurance only deepened her tears. She felt inadequate beside the talented poor like Easley and the gifted noble she called Brother Pat. Aline vented until she could speak no more, then embarrassedly asked what Angor was writing. He claimed it was a diary of reading and sleeping, a harmless lie to hide the complex puzzles he was actually solving, knowledge only he and John could read. She glanced at the unfamiliar characters, gave up, and drifted to idle gossip about noble women, which quickly bored Angor. Their conversation was cut short when the ship shuddered violently. Both grabbed the iron rails, accustomed to the rough seas of Devil's Water. The tremor lasted a few minutes, then subsided, allowing them a brief moment to straighten hair and adjust clothing before a new commotion erupted from above. Footsteps thundered on the deck, and Alex's voice called out, urging Angor to look outside. A massive silhouette loomed in the sky, a creature so enormous Angor could not tell head from tail. Terror surged, and he urged Aline to flee the cabin. The doors were flung open. Crew and passengers surged onto the deck, some trembling, others watching with detached curiosity. Sailors and handymen, seasoned on the redbud, seemed amused rather than afraid, suggesting the beast posed no immediate threat. From the deck, Angor finally saw the creature clearly. A floating whale spanning 200 meters, its side fins like wings that beat gusts of wind, sapphire eyes reflecting the sea, and a single horn crowning its streamlined forehead. A voice in the crowd declared the legendary cloud whale had been sighted in Devil's Water. Another warned that, despite its gentle reputation, they should prepare for the worst. The vice captain, clad in knight armor, knelt before three figures standing nearby and demanded assistance to activate the mirror veil on the redbud. The three were the escorts of the major wizard factions, Lady Merlin, a level 3 apprentice from the Tower of Hurricane, and 2 male wizards who had been stationed on the ship. Their presence signaled that the redbud's defenses would be summoned to shield the vessel from whatever the cloud whale might bring. New arrivals included Komoan, a level 2 apprentice wizard from Gravity Forest, and Mr. Florent, a level 3 apprentice from White Coral Floating Island Academy. Behind Florent, Aline spotted Mara and Alan, waving excitedly at their long-awaited reunion. As the ship sailed, Lady Merlin stepped forward to channel mana into the figurehead's pale crimson gem, a rare nightmare stone. Angor had noticed the gem before but now understood it was a powerful artifact that created illusions over large areas without magic formulas. Lady Merlin struggled to activate it, then deployed a shimmering mirror veil around the ship. She explained the cloud whale wouldn't break the illusion if left alone, as it was generally peaceful. Komoan from Gravity Forest watched the whale with longing, wishing it could be his mount. But Lady Merlin and Florent knew apprentices like them should focus on meditation, not impossible dreams. Suddenly, a sailor shouted about a crimson falling from the sky. The apprentices used farsight spells to see it clearly. Komoan identified it as a human. Mara saw a woman in red, and Lady Merlin noticed she was descending gently with a finely made umbrella. Florent's voice trembled as he named her Flora. Lady Merlin asked if he meant Flora the Blood Witch, and Florent nodded grimly. The kids sensed the fear among the apprentices and instinctively huddled together. Angor, worried about an attack, pulled Aline and Alan away. Mara quickly led them into the lookout room, warning them to hide and stay silent. He explained Flora was a formal black wizard who didn't care about common people but wouldn't harm them if they stayed out of sight. Mara's legs shook as he rejoined Florent, knowing they had to face this notorious, bloodthirsty wizard. Using Eagle Eye again, Lady Merlin spotted a group of demon falcons circling the cloud whale's back. These Arctic predators couldn't survive at sea without daily feeding, so someone was feeding them on the whale. The apprentices realized the powerful wizard riding the whale was the same man who favored demon falcons as familiars. Fear spread among them. Komoan said that if this man was hostile, even Lord Sabo wouldn't stand a chance. A strange, charming child's voice suddenly echoed across the redbud, announcing the discovery of a large nightmare stone. On deck, sailors panicked, realizing the ship's mirror veil barrier had failed. Angor tried to peek out, but Aline and Alan, trembling with fear, held him back. Angor silently dismissed their terror as cowardice, unaware that the broken spell had released a fear-inducing aura that seeped into the common folk, causing some sailors to even leap into the treacherous Devil's Water. For reasons unknown, Angor remained unaffected by the aura. Soon, Flora, the infamous Blood Witch, was on board. A bulky wizard from the floating mech city confronted Flora, accusing her of defying his city by taking the nightmare stone. Flora scoffed, asking if the ship belonged to the floating mech city and dismissing its occupants as weak apprentices and random wanderers. Angor, observing from his cabin, quickly pieced together that this wizard must be the powerful figure Mara had mentioned, the one protecting the redbud. The confrontation ended quickly, with Flora and the wizard reaching an unspoken agreement before flying off towards the distant cloud whale. Angor caught a glimpse of Flora in her red dress and veil, and for a moment, thought he saw a dark shadow trailing her. As the immediate danger passed, Alan and Aline finally released their pent-up fear in screams. Angor, annoyed by their cowardice, tried to comfort them. Mara then entered, looking pale and worried. Seeing Angor tending to the children seemed to soften his expression. Aline sobbed, asking if Flora was gone. Mara nodded, stroking her hair, and advised them not to dwell on the affairs of great wizards. He then led the children away, ostensibly to check on their triangle channeling training. As Angor returned to his room, he felt a sudden, intense itch on his back, precisely where the poker queen had scratched him during his talent test. He checked before and found no wound, but now the itch was undeniable. He scratched, but his skin felt smooth. Dismissing it as a bug bite, he decided a bath was in order. Meanwhile, high above on the back of the colossal cloud whale, a miniature manor had been constructed. Inside a grand tent, Mad Bear Sabo, the bulky wizard from the redbud, spoke with utmost deference to the elegant, green-haired phantom Master Sunders. Sunders, a level 2 wizard renowned across the southern region, barely acknowledged Sabo, instead focusing on an experiment that produced swirling illusions in his hand. Sunders casually dismissed his illusion, explaining that Greya, a gourmet wizard who enjoyed prophetic games, loved hide-and-seek, making her restaurant hard to find. He then coolly assigned Sabo the task of continuing the search. Flora, sitting nearby with bare feet, added a chilling glance that solidified Sabo's decision. Realizing he had no choice, Sabo agreed to have the Redbud patrol the surrounding waters until the restaurant was found. He reasoned that the ship would be safe under Sunder's indirect protection, and the mission of returning the talents wasn't urgent anyway. As Sabo departed, Flora quietly remarked that he was smart enough to comply, while Sunders simply returned to his experiment. Sunders suddenly frowned, looking outside. Flora asked what was wrong, but Sunders didn't answer, a doubt already forming. He wondered if he just felt an aura from the nightmare realm, speculating a hidden passage might exist in Devil's Water. A brief flash of joy crossed his face, but when he tried to sense the familiar aura again, it vanished, leaving him only with renewed doubt. Sunders wondered if the nightmare stone on his ship had accidentally linked to the nightmare realm because of similar space particles. The idea of a fixed entrance meant he could stop searching for Greya, a goal that had driven him for centuries. He quickly calmed down and ignored the nightmare aura. Flora, his longtime student, didn't press him when he stayed silent. Then her familiar, a black owl named Isa, landed on her shoulder and sent a message. Isa reported that the death match in Chamber 4 had ended, with Balba as the winner. Sunders looked southwest and saw the sealed Chamber 4. A bald young man with dark skin stood on a pile of corpses, his eyes glowing red and blue totems spreading over his muscles. He was the only survivor of Brute Cavern's brutal recruitment, a hybrid of human and otherworldly brute. Sunders noted he hadn't expected the winner to be a human-otherworldly hybrid. Flora said such a hybrid wouldn't last long in the world's consciousness unless banished. She asked what to do with him. Sunders said wizardry was about truth and bending rules with knowledge. They might know the hybrid's background but couldn't rule out interference from a powerful being from another plane. He ordered Flora to watch the hybrid closely and kill him if he showed anything abnormal. If harmless, train him in the bloodline art and turn him into a puppet avatar. His mixed blood meant a harsh fate either way. Only 8 other chambers had winners this year, fewer than the Redbud's recruits. Sunders said Brute Cavern's deadly method kept them competitive. Flora complained about chasing Greya for locations, but Sunders said capturing her alive was impossible despite her strange spells. Later, a storm tossed the Redbud like a cradle. Angor, Sunders' disciple, stayed awake all night, struggling to keep steady. When dawn came, he finally fell into a deep, weightless sleep that lasted until the moon was high. Waking, Angor felt the alien eye pendant against his chest. He looked at the transparent crystal, thinking of his home, brother, and John far away. He was still 5 months from the wizard continent after 5 years away. The pendant reminded him to keep it safe. Days passed in routine meals, puzzles, sleep. One afternoon, Angor saw his reflection in a mercury mirror and barely recognized himself. Dark circles, chapped lips, pale and worn down. The pressure of his 5-year promise had drained him, and he couldn't remember the last time he laughed. He splashed cold water on his face to calm down. The Redbud had no stress relief. Others meditated, but Angor only had his teacher's puzzles to focus on. He decided to keep his mind tense until he solved them. Angor's spirit had improved as he settled into a routine aboard the Redbud, but he noticed the ship kept circling the same area in Devil's Water. He had seen a distinct red reef 4 times in half a month. When he asked a pilot, the man gave a vague answer, clearly unwilling or unable to explain. Angor figured a formal wizard was controlling the ship's course, and as a passenger, he was powerless to change it. This only made him want to grow stronger to protect himself. It was now the 167th day since Angor left Gru Town, and the day he would solve the last of John's puzzles. He took out a small crystal tablet from his luggage, thinner than an insect's wing, brought from Earth by John. On Earth, it was a holographic communication device disguised as a watch. John had removed the worn strap years ago but kept the device in perfect condition. Angor closed his door and pressed the power button. A hologram appeared with a message in Hanzi saying the screen was locked and required answering a question from the admin. This was the 100th and final question John left him, involving correcting a hologram using the 5 Seidel aberrations and decoding a password with a Vigener cipher. For months, Angor had worked through these puzzles using chemistry, physics, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy, adapting Earth's constants to this world. Now he was ready to enter the final answer. After spending the afternoon on it, he typed in 9371201. The number meant nothing to others, but Angor recognized it as his birthday in the Gold's Pink Empire calendar. The first day of the month of freezing Earth in year 937. He hesitated, then confirmed the entry. The screen shifted, confirming the correct answer and unlocking the device. A peaceful grassland image appeared with 2 icons, a folder and a text document named to Angor. Curious, Angor opened the document. John's letter appeared, asking how long the 100 questions had troubled Angor and how far he was from home. He said Angor was working too hard for him and reflected on his own life, his ancient homeland on Earth and the regret of leaving his wife and child behind, thinking it was just a short research trip. John saw Angor as his legacy in this foreign world, proof that he had lived under this new sky, carrying forward Chinese culture and knowledge. John admitted he might never see the wizarding world himself but hoped Angor would follow the path of a wizard to the end, using his knowledge to create something new. He challenged Angor to write an essay explaining all truths in the wizarding world. John reminded him that the process of discovery mattered as much as the result and said he had left the last gift in the smart ship, guessing Angor was at sea by now. After finishing the letter, Angor sat quietly, closing his eyes and clenching his fists as sadness hit him. He felt John's deep care in every word and recalled memories of his teacher. Night had fallen before he finally sighed deeply. He saved the letter, made a backup, then closed it. Feeling a mix of loss and hope, Angor opened the only folder on the desktop. John had left Angor a folder packed with files. At first, Angor didn't think much of it, but when he opened it and saw the sheer volume of documents, he realized how valuable it was. John had transferred everything from his brain chip: astronomy, geography, literature, music, cultures. That's how John knew so much. On Earth, people had parasitic chips linked to their brains that stored data and gave instant photographic memory. Angor couldn't get the chip itself since it was bound to John's brain, but now he had the holographic tablet holding all that data. It would take time to memorize without the direct brain link, but Angor knew persistence would pay off. He carefully put the tablet away, knowing it was his most precious possession. With the tablet, Angor's life changed. He spent almost all his time on it, only putting it down to recharge with solar power. Instead of diving straight into John's data, he scanned all his books from Moonwater City. The tablet's camera could convert images to words, but only for Earth languages, not the Goldspink Empire's official script. So he saved the scans as pictures, planning to translate them later. This took a full week. Life at sea grew dull. Alan and Aline were busy training their mana channeling and rarely visited, leaving Angor lonely. He finally started reading John's data, beginning with Earth's scientific works. He soon saw much of it didn't apply to his world, so he focused on the ideas behind them. His reading expanded to entertainment, music, and folk novels. After some novels, Angor understood what John meant by having a higher purpose than typical heroes. Some transmigration novels caught his interest and helped pass the time. The more he read, the more curious he became about Earth, wishing he could visit its advanced cities someday. One day, after reorganizing the tablet's folders into the Earth and My World, Angor was heading to eat when a sharp whistle sounded across the ship. It was the Redbuds' red alert. 3 long blows, 2 short. Mara had told them to stay in their rooms during red alerts, so Angor quickly turned back. Other talents were out in the halls, guessing wildly about sea monsters, storms, reefs, or even the cloud whale attacking. Everyone looked worried and scared. Angor felt the same, powerless but hoping for peace. Back in his room, he opened the air vent to look outside but saw nothing. A thick mist had surrounded the ship, limiting visibility to less than 10 meters. The unknown stirred his imagination. Though more mature than most teens, Angor struggled to stay calm. He told himself the alert was just because of the mist and everything would be fine once it cleared, but he didn't really believe it. Hours passed, the mist stayed, and the all-clear whistle never came. Everything seemed unchanged until something finally happened.